Continue to point out we have these divergences on the weekly chart, but we're starting the week off with the red awesome oscillator bar. We've had other bars turn red. It didn't remain that way by the end of the week. I'll be watching to see if this one does or not. Again, sometimes you start getting a red bar and you start turning down hard. Other times you get a red bar, getting a red bar or two, and you rebound back up, sometimes even make new highs or get a counter trend. We've got that gap directly overhead. So again, while the divergence is forming, it may be that we start getting red bars and we still, maybe we go a little bit lower, or maybe we have Friday's low hold and eventually try to rebound back up. Watching to see how it unfolds. Again, you could just be closing, you could get a strong close down. End of the week, signals again continue to remain bearish. NASDAQ has some bullish divergences now, and it could be we get triple bullish divergences in the next day or two. So we'll be watching to see, does that for a possible recovery, and then if we do get a recovery, that's a if we get a recovery, does this remain red by the end of the week, which would be warning that momentum is waning. We started to get some warning signs with our recent highs. Couldn't close that way. So again, listen carefully. I'm watching Friday's low. Do we start building upon it and start rebounding and getting a big rally, and that low holds? We maybe get one more push down and try to get a rally, or do the rallies fail and we just continue to sink lower? Watching the divergences that are forming on the NASDAQ very closely on the 60-minute chart, possible triple bullish divergence in the next day or two. Watch the video all the way through. Got your red bar here on the weekly chart for the S&P, bar on the awesome oscillator. Another reason why I think we can either rebound off Friday's low or go a little bit lower and try to rebound our 50 periods down here at 54.17. NASDAQ, if we do get another leg down, might make it to the 50. We'll see if the S&P does or not, should we get another leg down. But again, you could end up forming a divergence here or a confirmation of a lower high. It's got a good shot that it's peaked, if NVIDIA has. But if we get more red bars and then turn up, again, you could see a divergence develop here going into the Fed meeting or just after the Fed meeting. You can form a divergence here that may give us a rebound, and we still may have that red awesome oscillator bar as we get a rebound. Again, S&P still may move to a new high because the gap was at the very top bar. NASDAQ was not. Again, watching this closely, and the MACD moved to a higher high, it could still form a divergence as well. Continue to have a bearish reversal of conditions with momentum being bearish here. We've got red bars, red candles. We're below the 10-period moving average. Red awesome oscillator bars, but they're not negative. So does it go negative, or do we see green bars show up and maybe go up and try to get a lower high or a divergence? But before we do that, we might get another push down. We'll be watching these 50-period moving averages. Gap fill there on NASDAQ. NASDAQ daily chart here. S&P daily chart, pardon me. S&P daily chart, or I'm sorry, NASDAQ daily chart. Man, I'm tongue-tied here. NASDAQ daily chart, there it is. Doing the same thing. Again, it's coming down here. Are we going to start seeing green bars in the next day or two and end up seeing a confirmation of a lower high, maybe a divergence? But like I said, I think if we get another push down to the 50 here to try to fill the gap over here, I think you're going to go back up and probably get a lower high with NASDAQ. And if you do, again, you've got a possible head and shoulders, maybe with a lopsided right shoulder, maybe with the slanted neckline downward or something, or maybe we just get a bottoming tail down here and it comes back up to the horizontal support area. We'll see what happens. But again, do we start going negative with the awesome oscillator in the daily time frame, or do we start eventually seeing green bars going into the Fed meeting, going beyond the Fed meeting maybe, and getting this again? We've got a good shot at a summer sell-off. Shopping process surrounding the Fed. NASDAQ cannot make new highs. I believe the Fed is going to pivot by lowering rates. Pivot means they're going to start lowering rates come September 18th. The market will likely peak before they do that. It could be doing that right now with NASDAQ, or maybe with the Fed meeting with the S&P if we go back and fill that gap. I'm looking for a topping process. Expected prices to go up and hit the upper channel in the weekly time frame. We've done that. I told you we could overthrow those levels. We did, and it evolved into rising wedges here on the S&P and NASDAQ weekly charts. Again, do we see green bars and turn back up, or do we go negative? Or do we go negative and turn back up? It could be that way as well. The NASDAQ, and we're getting oversold, could still go deeper and then turn back up. Watching the 50 is at 19,356. Our gap fill is at the 19,210 area. So we'll be watching these levels very closely. The gap fill is just underneath it. Now, same thing here with the NASDAQ weekly chart. You're starting the week off with the red bar. We'll see if we close that way. Maybe NASDAQ doesn't and S&P does, or vice versa. We'll see what happens. You still have these divergences on the MACD. The stochastic rolled over. It's now breaking the 80 area, bouncing off the 10-week moving average here. You still have a bullish reversal of conditions here in the weekly chart. We'll see if we take out the 10 but still recover, or if we just bounce off of Friday's low. We'll be watching. You have an evening star reversal in the weekly time frame that I talked about in great length and detail over the weekend. Please consider supporting the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like my charts, if you like my indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. Follow the link below. It'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want. I don't have any sponsors. Contact me all the time, and I turn all those offers down because I don't want to sell you a bunch of stuff you don't need. Send you to a bunch of websites, to buy stuff. If you want to go stuff, you'll go to Stuff Mart. So rather than doing that, I just ask that you help out and do what you can. The money made on YouTube is through sponsorship. Ad revenue pays very, very little. I do need your help in order to make it work. I just put it all out there for free and just ask that you do what you can to help out. So if you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. It would be very encouraging to hear from you. Thank you. Look, the VIX was down today. The VIX 3 sessions ago predicted that we were going to have an up day either Friday or Monday, and we got it. On Monday, the VIX was correct. The VIX closed down by 9.75%, closing back below 15 at 14.91. It did get this long leg doji. I don't know if that's a misprint or not because I look at all my different charts and it's the same print, so I assume that is a correct print. Nevertheless, again, it is a doji and we're now turning down. So if we do pull back, we could see the market attempt a recovery or, again, get one more push down on the S&P and NASDAQ, attempt a recovery. So again, I'm watching to see, does Friday's lows hold the 200 on the S&P and horizontal support on the NASDAQ, or do we get one more push down? I do think you got a good shot of an attempted recovery looking at the awesome oscillators, as I've talked about in the daily time frame. And again, the VIX could come back to the moving averages. We had the breakout of this triangle. Could backtest this move. We'll be watching. Right now, we're above the 50 period. I told you we got above the 50 period. Over here, we continue to be above the 50 period. When you're above the 50 period on the VIX, bad things happen on the S&P 500, and that's what we're seeing. We could be going back to the 50 period for a test. 50 period is still below the 200. If we drop below the 200, the black line, we'll be watching the moving averages. You got the 10 and 20 now getting above the 50 in a bullish realignment. So again, we'll see if we back test this move. We'll see if we go back and test our moving averages. Continue to point out, we had the tightening of the Bollinger Band suggesting something was about to happen, and it did. We got this sell-off as we got those 9 counts in the daily time frame and obviously in the weekly time frame, just a little bit higher, but they did play out. So as what I'm watching is to see, I'm watching to see if we're going to attempt a rebound to go back and fill the gap, the 20,400 area that we had previously gapped lower. Do we attempt to do that right now off of Friday's low, or do we go a little bit lower and attempt to do that? That's what I'm watching. But the signals remain bearish. Trend signals for NASDAQ and the momentum signals are both bearish. It's being validated with momentum going into the negative region. When we got that sell-off with the CPI, I was looking for a lower high at the golden pocket and the 78.6 Fibonacci. Got it, and we had this sell-off, and we gapped lower 2 days later. Also be watching if we do attempt a recovery, either going lower or here, do the momentum signals start turning back to bullish? What happens to the trend signals? Right now, they're both bearish with the NASDAQ. So again, if we do go lower, I'll be watching the gap fill and the 50-period moving average. Signals remain bearish. I warned you before the sell-off was going to happen. We were getting these bearish signals on the NASDAQ. We got some over here, but we only went sideways. And again, flip the trend. This time we did. Trend signals remain bearish. See a little gray shaded area? This is telling us something big is getting ready to happen. Now, we may bottom out here, go back up, and still have this form, and then end up selling off with the Fed and filling the gap. It may be that it's telling us we're going to get a bigger move down, but it's telling us right now, here, right now, immediately, it's telling us something big is getting ready to set up. Over here, it was this move on higher. Over here, it was this move lower. It's warning us something is coming down the pike. Same thing with the S&P 500. Trend signals bearish. Momentum signal still bearish, momentum line still pointing down, the trend signals, but you got this gray shaded area. So again, even if we go a little bit lower, it's telling us something big is getting ready to happen. Maybe we get a push up here, or go a little bit lower, get a push up, but then get a hard push down with the summer sell-off. Momentum is negative. Again, could be that we just don't fill the gaps and we end up getting a bigger push down. We're in a topping process, where we attempt to fill the gaps sooner rather than later, but no guarantee we do. As I keep saying, signals are bearish. Warned you about the sell-off. I warned you about these signals, just like on the NASDAQ, that we're setting up. And we gapped lower, momentum began to shift, and we've got red bars. Momentum is bearish. We'll continue to monitor if it remains bearish. It is being confirmed with momentum. So again, just as long as the signals remain bearish, that we can continue to decline. That we're trying to form bullish divergences on the 60-minute charts. The NASDAQ anyways has it and could form a triple. We can possibly form it on the 60-minute chart. The video all the way through and you will see that. Well, we start the Monday off with gap higher and a rally. We talked about the bullish falling wedge on the S&P 500 over the weekend. I told you that very well could be the case. For a bigger rebound, maybe it started, but we still may get one more push down. I'll show you what I'm looking at on the intraday charts. We're moving now into the heart of earnings season. This week and next week, we're going to get a lot of important stocks, really over the next 3 weeks. The next 2 weeks, a lot of S&P 500 companies, Magnificent Seven stocks, and other important tech stocks. If we get a rebound, but tomorrow, after the bell, Tuesday, we're going to get Tesla and we're going to get Alphabet. So we're going to be watching to see if we try to bottom and try to rally on into Wednesday with that session. If we can bottom out tomorrow, maybe we get another leg down the gap and get higher lows. But again, NASDAQ can still go down and hit that 50-period moving average before all is said and done, before getting a bigger rally. We'll see what happens. We got IBM after the bell on Wednesday. Important stocks, we got airline stocks, we got 3M, we got AT&T, we got Coca-Cola tomorrow morning, and UPS. So just a lot of big names. We got Spotify. Next week we'll have the Fed meeting and more important stocks. We'll be watching to see if we try to bottom out surrounding the Alphabet and Tesla earnings here come after the bell on Tuesday. Does that create a bottom, or do we get a bottom ahead of that? Bottom on Friday and are going to bounce off support. We have a gap directly below there on NASDAQ, which I'll show you at the 50-period moving average. NDX dropped 5.85%. Last week it was down 4%, 5.85% from the highs. We're starting to try to get a rally here. We'll see. Still might be a 5-leg push lower if NASDAQ has in fact topped. I believe that NASDAQ is in a topping process. I think we have a really good shot that NASDAQ has peaked. If NVIDIA has peaked on June 20th and stops making new highs, they both gapped lower. I'm going to be watching does this low hold. I talked about these levels over the weekend. I talked about this low right here. And again, if we get a bounce, then maybe go up here and you get this unbalanced head and shoulders. But I also talked about this gap right here, and it may be that we go down to that 50-period moving average on the daily chart and hit this 19,210 level to fill the gap, in the low 19,000 area, hit the 50-period, and then rebound. If you do that, you got a possible 5-leg push lower. Now, it could be that, this is wave 3, 4, and 5, and it's like that, but it looks better that if we get one more push down, getting rejection at the 200 here on the 60-minute chart of the NASDAQ, that, again, we could see a bottom filling this gap and hitting that 50-period and then rebounding. Either way, I think we're eventually going to head up and try to fill this gap at 20,398. So I do think that we will hit that level. Now, I talked to you about when we had this sell-off on July 11th. We peaked on July 10th, 500 points. Again, we began to see the selling with the CPI. I told you, again, very good chance that the top is in. I told you we can rebound back up to the 78.6 Fibonacci or into the golden pocket, but I talked about the 78.6 Fibonacci. We hit it right on the nose. Sellers were lurking there. We got a topping tail, came down, and eventually gapped lower and saw this sell-off. So again, eventually I think this gap is probably going to get filled, but the question is, do we just bounce here, come back and fill the gap maybe, or don't fill the gap, maybe just a gap and go here, and we head back up there? Or do we come down further? Now, again, we're getting very oversold and we're getting this rebound, but I still think that there's a strong possibility, and I told you we had the bullish diversions over the weekend, but I still think there's a possibility that we get a triple diversions here and we get one more push down. Regardless, again, I do think we'll see a bigger rebound, whether it has started now or whether we get another push lower first and then we get it. We're going to get a 9 count tomorrow, possibly on the NASDAQ, the daily time frame. So again, could we see a bottom in the next day or two? Possibly, if we have this rally fail and it's only a counter trend in an ABC move. I'll be watching. Does the RSI start coming down? We start coming back to fill the gap, but is this just a gap and trap? We're gapping higher right now on an intraday basis. It's a gap and go, but does it end up being a gap and trap? And we come down and fill this gap and hit our 50 period in the daily and so forth, and form a bullish triple divergence here. Let me just scroll down here. Form a triple bullish divergence on the MACD. We had these little divergences that gave us this bounce. Talked about that, how we are forming the bullish divergences at the support level over the weekend. It's given us this bounce. Talked about either gapping lower and then getting a rebound with that divergence, or again trying to bounce here this level, and about also coming down and filling this gap possibly if we just get a bounce. So possible head and shoulders here, and again, if we start taking this level out, then I'd be just looking more at the Fibonacci retracements. But this gap, I think, is probably got a pretty good shot at getting filled as we go closer towards the Fed meeting and in the heart of earnings here. So I'll be watching the divergences here on the 60-minute chart for NASDAQ. Now, if we have a 5-leg push down, if we get one more push down, or if this is a 5-leg push down, but if we get one more push down or go a little higher and get another push down, and again, the overlap would be right here, so you can't go higher than the low point of wave 1 there. They can't overlap. In Elliott wave is speculation. I'm just saying that if the NASDAQ has topped, if we have a 5-leg push lower, pretty good chance we're going to get an ABC move back up, and you're not going to be able to make a new high. The rally may look something like this, where we go higher, but then end up selling off and get an ABC move, 3-leg push back up. Just something to pay attention to. Should we get another push down? My guess is that's probably going to be the case, and we'll form a triple bullish divergence. And again, I think the NASDAQ shorts, if we do get another push down, might short positions, and the dip crowd might come back in, and the shorts might flip to long right here and ride it back up. If do in fact get a triple bullish divergence, we'll be near the 50 period moving average in this gap fill. So we'll see what happens. Assuming that we didn't bottom, and again, like I said, it could be either one. We could bottom here and on this horizontal support and try to rally, or another push down. But I think this is a strong possibility, this triple bullish divergence on the RSI and the MACD. So again, could be we get a bottom in the next 2 sessions or so if we do get another push down. This is a gap and trap. We'll see what happens. It's still possible that this is a bottom here. If we stop making new lows here, that is certainly possible. But again, in the daily time, still bearish with momentum in the trend for NASDAQ. I still think you're going to probably get another push down. Now, I told you over the weekend that, again, we were hitting this horizontal support right below. We had this gap fill. We had extremes here, and little divergences were forming. Seeing those divergences play out. So again, we'll see what happens. Still may go a little higher, but we'll be watching to see if we come back down here to try to fill the gap and then go higher, or are we trying to make a recovery right here and now? If you do, again, you got the possible head and shoulders, or maybe go down, you get some kind of bottoming tail, and you still end up setting up the neckline for the pattern. We'll be watching, but this is the NASDAQ 60-minute chart. We did violate this trend line ever so slightly and got back above it. I told you trend lines can change. So again, if this does amount to a bottom on Friday, we just come back and fill the gap, then that trend line might be tested again. And rather than going down and filling the gap and hitting the 50, we might establish a higher low. So we'll be watching to see which way it plays out. If we do get a pullback or reversal that takes us down to a new low, we'll be watching to see how it unfolds. Might have to go up to extremes here before we turn down. We'll be watching to see if we can clear the 200 period, the black line there, or not. The 50 is dropping down towards the 200. If we get another push down, they'll probably get a bearish cross, and then we'd have to get back above both if we're going to get an ABC move if we have a 5-leg push down. That's the smaller head and shoulders that we have here. Again, with this line right here on the 60-minute chart, if we try to rebound right now, if we filled the gap, it would be an unbalanced pattern. If we come down to this 50 and fill the gap, again, you might try to form a bottom surrounding the 50 period moving average, and then get a rebound again with earnings or with the Fed. But then again, eventually going to get a summer sell-off. No guarantee. Listen to me carefully. There's no guarantee. Signals remain bearish. There's no guarantee we fill the gap, but we could if we attempt to rebound either at horizontal support or at the 50 period moving average and the gap fill area here. It is possible because we're becoming oversold. No guarantee that we fill the gap. We may do it at a much later date. We may not do it at all. But I'll be watching the gap down here at 19,210, this dotted blue line, and the gap up here with the dotted red line at 20,398. I think that we're likely forming a larger head and shoulders pattern, but again, could recover. We're starting the week off getting some red bars on the awesome oscillator in the weekly time frame. Oftentimes when you get the red bars, oftentimes you will attempt a recovery. We'll be watching to see how it unfolds. We broke down from the rising wedge here, broke that channel I showed you on the 60-minute chart here. I've just connected this low and this low for the rising wedge, and we bounced off of it previously right here around the 10 period. Lost a 10. 10 still moving down towards the 20 here on the NASDAQ daily chart. Again, the negative divergence is played out here, and to recover, you still may confirm a lower high on the RSI, or you might get a divergence if you try to make a new high. But if NVIDIA and the semiconductors have peaked, then good chance NASDAQ has peaked also. I pointed out that bullish falling wedge over the weekend that happened on Friday. We broke out. We back tested here on the 15-minute chart. Told you we might try to go up, but it might just be a short-term. These bullish divergences on the intraday charts, they're just short-term price fluctuations in the intraday time frame. The big the divergences in the daily and the weekly time frame, often in the 60-minute time frame, they mark bigger turns up and down. But here we had this breakout and back test, and I told you that might give us a rebound. It might give us a bottom here. But again, it still might be we get one more push down. The bullish falling wedge might have just given us a push lower, a push higher, back up moving towards our 200 period moving average. So again, watching this, and again, as we're turning up, RSI has been making its way towards 70. So the move may not be done yet. We'll be watching. If it is, and that's all she wrote, if we have an ABC move done here for a possible wave 4, if it's done, then we'll see what happens. Or do we go a little higher and then turn? We'll see if we end up setting up a lower high that comes back and fills our gap here today. And if so, does this low get taken out? So we'll be watching. Did we validate a bottom, a short-term bottom there on Friday? Now remember, the VIX was predicting a rally either on Friday or Monday. The VIX was right. There was an 85% chance of a rally today. We got it. The NASDAQ and the Dow and the S&P were all up after a sharp drop. 15-minute chart, let me show you on. Now keep in mind this bullish falling wedge. We're bouncing off the 200 period on the 60-minute chart. Give us these little bottoming tails on the 60-minute chart up at 200 and the inverted hammer. And again, about either bouncing here and going up and coming back down and testing this level and hitting the trend line, or having this be a bottom. I still think there's a possibility that we go down, get one more leg down. We had a divergence on the NASDAQ 60-minute chart, but we didn't have one on the S&P. We just reached an extreme at that 200 period. I still think you can form a divergence here and a triple bullish divergence on the NASDAQ RSI, still come down here, but then try to bottom out with earnings or the Fed or whatever, and then come back up. NASDAQ could still lower high. Well, the S&P goes and gets a higher high. The gap was up here at the top. So again, we'll see what happens. And it could be, listen to me, it could be the NASDAQ moves lower, but the S&P gets a higher low, it just fills the gap and comes back here and does that. But on a 5-leg push lower, it's more of an ABC type of a move because we're not done, and then we start getting this big move up, and we start coming up here and moving above this high. Certainly possible. It's possible that we get a divergence between the NASDAQ and S&P down here, but don't rule out that we hit the rising channel, which I'll show you in a moment. But again, just aware of the 200, this horizontal support level in the rising channel, and the possibility that we still might form a divergence. Maybe we just get a confirmation of a higher low and come back and fill the gap, and that's the end of it, and we don't take out Friday's low. We'll be watching to see how it unfolds. But again, you got a shot that a bottom forms, either our lows on Friday or if we get one more push down, if it's followed by a shift in momentum in the daily time frame turning back up, and maybe these divergences. Now, again, here's the same thing with the MACD. It moved down here to an extreme. It still might form a divergence, and maybe that's tomorrow. Maybe it's with the Tesla or Alphabet earnings, and then we get a rebound. Maybe we come down here, sell off. Tomorrow I'll get an ugly sell off or something, and then rebound come following day with the Tesla and the Alphabet earnings, or maybe they give us the bottom, we get further selling, but then rebound. We'll see how it works out. Still think you got a pretty good shot of filling those gaps, but no guarantee. My signals remain bearish. We'll see if they turn back to bullish with momentum. We'll see what happens. We could be forming a topping process surrounding the Fed here. I get the Fed announcement a week from this Wednesday. Keeping the bullish falling wedge in your mind that, again, it may just be giving us a bounce off the 200, keeping horizontal support. Let's look at this, zoom out and look at the channel. Again, here's the S&P 60-minute chart zooming out. Again, we're bouncing off the 200. If we exclude the shadow over here, it's the black trend line of the channel. And again, we're bouncing off of it. Maybe that's it. Maybe the S&P comes down, gets a higher low if we fill the gap, and that's it, and that low holds from Friday. We get one more push down with the S&P, then you have, including the shadow, you have this lower boundary, which I talked about over the weekend, either the 200 or this trend line, probably going to act as support. And again, we'll see if we can get some traction back up with one of these trend lines, and the one we hit on Friday with our 200. So we'll see if that low can hold. We'll see if the divergence forms or not here on the MACD and the RSI. The black channel would be that we push up here and that we go above the upper boundary of the red. And I've just drawn a parallel trend line here, and it's just slightly above the other. So again, that we would just go fill the gap up, make a new high, and get something like that. But again, good chance I think NASDAQ has peaked if NVIDIA has. And while we've already had a divergence between the S&P 500 moving to a new high right here, NASDAQ did not. A lower high, as we were predicting, it would get rejection at the 78.6 Fibonacci. It did. Still may end up getting a larger divergence between the two, but keep your eye on gaps overhead. Keep your eye on the gap below on NASDAQ and these trend lines right here. And let me just take away the black one so you can see the red one here if we do go lower. And here it is with momentum. Again, momentum also formed a little bullish divergence there, turning back up on the S&P. May end up getting, again, a larger multiple point divergence if we, like the RSI, if the RSI forms a divergence, we might get a multiple point divergence there, but we've got to bounce off the 200. But I told you one of these levels was probably going to act as support. Right now it's the 200. We'll see if we have that low hold or not. But again, a nice looking channel here and this parallel upper boundary that we turned off of. If we get one more dump and we hit this trend line, it might be a place where we might mark a short-term bottom. If not, if we do get a higher low or just keep going and start seeing everything turn back to bullish, again, we'll see if our 200 period holds as support or not. The 60-minute chart. NASDAQ, by the way, was up 300 points, up just over 1.5%, 1.54% today. So again, we'll be watching that. We're still below the 20 and the 10 here. We'll be watching to see if we test the 50 in the gap or not. And is this just a little counter trend bounce? But eventually, I think we're probably going to make our way up there. Whether we're trying to start that now or whether we get another push down or not, well, the jury's still out on that. We'll see what happens day or two. We're about to get a possible 9 count on the NASDAQ. Nevertheless, I digress. Here is the daily chart on the S&P. Getting back to the S&P again, you got the same possible head and shoulders pattern here. Again, no guarantee we fill the gap. Eventually, I think we make our way down to the 200, which is probably going to be above this neckline by the time we reach it. Probably going to end up overthrowing it like Bitcoin did when it sold off after the June high. I predicted Bitcoin would rebound at the July 5th low, and it has rebounded. Started to see the NASDAQ and the tech stocks and the Magnificent Seven stocks begin to sell off. Bitcoin rebounded. We've seen the rebound in the Russell recently. Bitcoin had dropped 27.5%. They threw their money, took the money out of tech, threw money into Bitcoin. My signals were turning back to bullish down at the bottom. This massive rally. Bitcoin, I'm watching to see if it's going to get a lower high and diverge with the S&P. Other divergence reference point with the S&P or not. I think my latest Bitcoin video at the end of this video, if you want to see it, pretty fascinating. The divergence is going on First of all, between the S&P and NASDAQ, and then secondly, between the S&P and Bitcoin. Again, same thing here. The divergences are playing out. We gapped lower. We're below the 10, but we dropped below the 20. We're back above it. Continue. Again, you've got your trend line, or we may try to fill the gap immediately. But again, we still go lower. You've got this possible head and shoulders formation. NASDAQ's already down here. S&P is not. If NASDAQ exceeds that level, goes to the 50, S&P might go to just above the 50 here, and this horizontal support level around the 54.50 area. Larger head and shoulders, possible smaller head and shoulders on those 60-minute charts. NASDAQ may come down and try to fill the gap right here. S&P is still pretty far away from it, and that would be beyond the 50 period. NASDAQ's already down here at the horizontal support level trying to bounce, where S&P is still way above that area. Watching to see if we get another push down, and if so, does it carve out a short-term bottom or not? Our signals remain bearish. I guarantee we rally back up to fill the gap. We certainly could. If NASDAQ tries to bounce off the 50 period or horizontal support. The NVIDIA and the semiconductors try to get a bigger rally. Could be starting right here now if Friday's lows can hold. Did you hear what I just said? It could be starting now if Friday's lows can hold. We'll be monitoring the situation.